Hello, my name is Starla Henderson, and this is Fronterhouse Quilts blog, and we're continuing to work on our fall sampler. Today we are going to start working on the tree. The first part of our tree are the tree limbs. Just like in the rest of this, you have to sew down what is the furthest away from you. And your tree limbs need to be sewed down because they're going to go underneath your actual trunk. So what I have done today, so that you can see for filming purposes, I have drawn on the back of a piece of fabric just one side of our tree with a few limbs, and today we are going to put on one of the limbs. Now the limbs can be a little bit difficult, mostly because of this sharp point that's on the end. One thing though I do like about this tree, and that's one reason I chose this particular design for this blog, is, for example, here's this one. This has a very fine point. If you're having trouble making that point, if you're a new person to applique, there's an easy solution to that. This is great practice. If it doesn't look exactly the way you want it, put a leaf over it. Nobody will ever know it but you. In fact, I put leaves over the end of most of my trunks just to show you that unless I told you, you would never realize that's what was going on. So, because leaves are usually hanging off the end of that, it looks perfectly natural. But today we are going to make the tree limb, and we're going to make one of those points. We've made points before. This is no different. And all of the limbs have a curve, an outside curve and an inside curve, which we've already done. And because this is such a long limb, I've already started this curve, and gone through the curve. Just remember, you need to clip right up to the line that you've drawn, and do it about I do it almost a quarter of an inch away, quarter of an inch between each one. So we're going to work up towards this point, taking tiny stitches, tacking down, appliquing down each little section that you have clipped, so that this will lay in the curve that we want it to lay in. And you're just going to keep right on working steadily all the way up this first side of this limb, and we're going to approach this point here pretty quick. Alright, now I've tucked this all the way down till we get to that point. Now these points are really fine, and they are going to be hard to get completely sharp, and we're going to just do our best. And again, if it doesn't look like you want it to, slap a leaf over it. Okay, as you come up into that point, you're going to come up right where the point, the V of that point, on the inside part of it. Alright, then I'm going to pin my thread out of the way like I do. I'm going to turn my work, and now it's time to trim. One thing about these points that are really narrow like that, is one reason it's so hard to turn them is because you have so much excess fabric in there, even from what we've already just turned. So I pull it back, and you can see the seam allowance I've just turned. And I'm going to trim that back to probably right at 1/8 of an inch, as close as I can get there, and knock this out of the way. Get rid of those. Alright, now I'm going to pull my thread just a little bit, because when I pulled that back I kind of loosened my stitches, so just tug it a little bit. Now, using my needle as my tool, I'm going to take at the very end of this, and I'm just going to swoop it under. It's just this little swoosh motion. Do it one more time. It gets harder every time because you manipulate that fabric and you kind of fray it, but we're going to just push it under. There we go. Now we've pushed it under, and I pull again on my thread just to pull that corner out sharp, and I start tucking this in, tucking it all in. I've got a pretty sharp little point there. Now I'm going to go in, and I was so excited I forgot to put on my thimble. Here we go. Put my needle in. I'm going to take a really tiny stitch because you have just tucked in a lot of little, for this space, a lot of fabric in that spot. And you want to tack that in so that it doesn't come out on you. So tiny stitches are a must. And I'm going to just take several tiny stitches over what I've just tucked in. And then I'm going to keep right on going, tucking it in, pulling this back. And now I've turned that little corner like that. And you've got just a little pointy, little narrow strip right there. That is your point. And now you're just going to go all the way rest of the way down this other side, and that will be that first limb. This isn't hard. In fact, my little point turned out pretty good there. And once you do this a few times, it gets much easier. And if you have to, trim out this seam allowance too, if it's too much. I wouldn't suggest you trim it much more than a scant 1/4 inch, especially if you're new to applique. But I have worked with as little as an 1/8 of an inch before when it was necessary. And it can be done. You just have to be really careful. So, get that trimmed. Go ahead and finish down the other side, and you're going to do this with all of your limbs, every one of them. And then after we get all of the limbs on, then next time I will show you how to do the tree trunk. After doing the limbs, the tree trunk is going to be a breeze. It's just soft, gentle curves. This is Starla Henderson with Fronterhouse Quilts blog, and we just learned how to applique our tree trunks. Thank you for joining me.